Hello and welcome back to the Built Environment Marketing Show, hosted by me, Ayo Abbas from Abbas Marketing. This is an episode that I really enjoyed recording because it was with two people I know really, really well. I was joined by Aceil Haddad from Map PR and Lisa Levy, who is a strategic comms consultant. And between us, we've got tons of built environment communications and Marcoms experience. And what we want to talk about was actually about the Built Environment Comms Collective, the BE Comms Collective that we set up. It's something that we kind of have been building for the past 6 months, and we wanted to share more about our 7 deadly sins of built environment communications. Because, to be honest, we are seeing the same problems over and over again across major firms and projects. So we just wanted to talk about that, and that's what we've done in this episode. And those problems could be ranged from missing the bigger picture to having no critical friend in a crisis. They're really not small issues, and they cost projects time, money, and reputation. So if you work on complex programs or advise clients who do, this one's for you. Let's get into it.
Great. So my name's Aceil, founder of Map PR. I work predominantly on corporate comms, but also straddle across consumer and stakeholder and political comms as well.
Lisa?
Hi, I am a jack of all trades as well, but I particularly focus on stakeholder engagement, internal communications, and the whole strategic piece regarding communications and marketing as well.
Fantastic. Now, I kind of wanted to bring you on because we've kind of been, I guess, brewing an idea for about 6 months or so now called the BE Comms Collective. So I thought I would bring you on to kind of talk about it and our idea and what it is. So who wants to go first? So what is the BE Comms Collective, Aceil?
I mean, I think it's a lot of us who are doing some really great things, and you know, no army is one person. We need a lot of us. So I think it's a number of us that have got together. We all have skills. We all like each other. Very important. And we also complement each other and know that we've got each other's back and we can pick things up. And at the end of the day, we want to do a good job for a good client.
We all bring different specialisms, and we're all kind of joining forces because we see the same issues with the types of clients, the top clients that we're working with all the time, and we wanted to build a collective to kind of address that, and that's kind of what we did, isn't it, Lisa?
Definitely, and I think we are purpose-driven, we're like-minded. I saw some synergy in terms of what we were talking about, and it was the same old, same old. And what I mean by that is, although our sector has come a long way in terms of innovation, as we embrace AI, as we become more educated about the actual science behind what we do, and that's important because I think a lot of our colleagues feel that it seems to happen by magic, or it's talent, or it's insight, rather than actually an iterative process and strategy and plan. We have the power to move the needle positively for clients in terms of reputation and brand and any of the things that we decide to help them on. But there's still an inherent issue about a lack of understanding about people like us, what we do, the benefits we bring to the discipline, how much that's going to cost. There's always a view that we can do more for less, as if it happens by magic.
Yeah, and that is one of the big issues, the more for less, isn't it? But it's also that thing, I think, as we also spoke about when we were talking over the months, was around, I guess there's a lot more junior people and there's a lot less senior people in house that we're seeing all the time, and there's that level of experience and expertise which companies still need. So that's one of the reasons we were like, actually, we've got the skills together as a collective to kind of actually bring something of value, which is what we wanted to do.
But to that point, I mean, I'm from a consultancy background. I know Lisa has worked in-house, but we all know that, as a senior person, get wheeled out and wheeled back in again because your cost is too high. And, what we're trying to do is do something different where, we will be there from day dot, but also be your working team because, we don't have those huge overheads because frankly, we just want to do a good job for the right person, the right business.
Absolutely. Anyway, so talking about the 7 deadly sins of communications, which is our kind of playful campaign. So what are they, Lisa? Do you want to kind of run us through them and roughly I guess, what they
Yeah.
look like?
So starting with the first one, which I think there's no order of importance, but missing the bigger picture, not singing from the same hymn sheet, short-term thinking versus long-term planning and thinking. This is how we've always done it. A lack of confidence, not having a critical friend in a crisis, and a lack of clear vision. Those were the 7 sins that we felt were the top of the list in terms of the everyday that the group was seeing.
And I think that's quite a wide range of, I guess, issues and challenges, isn't it? Because I know, like, one of the discussions that we've had in the past was recently we looked at that the parliamentary review that was going on for like one of the major rail projects, and they were looking at, you know, actually how long it takes to get things through planning, and actually quite often when you look at it, it's down to not having a strategic plan or communications approach in the first place, and then it's just getting more and more diluted. And I think when you look at a lot of the kind of major infrastructure programs that I know that I've worked on when I've worked in-house as well, a lot of it is down to kind of having that plan and that strategy and that guiding light, and quite often you don't see it. And I think that's where a lot of those kind of issues that you've just outlined actually come in. Where have you seen them come up, Aceil?
I mean, I think it's completely to your point. It's on every project, right? Every project should have its own business plan, vision, and end goal, and so often that is not outlined, and then not everything is pinned to it. You know, we always need to be looking at the end goal as we sort of drive there going forward. But so often we're so reactive to what's happening, rather than actually this is how it fits into the timeline, and this is what matters. And then people just get, you know, they fall off the wayside, people leave naturally, and there's a turnover. You know, I know Lisa can talk about it more from an infrastructure perspective, but you know, that's why there's been such a cock up on so many massive infrastructure projects, is because they haven't pushed what is the end goal, what are we delivering, and why does it matter.
The senior leaders change that vision. They might want to shift it somewhere else, go somewhere completely different, and not necessarily know what's happened in the past, which is actually quite important, isn't it? What got you there and why those decisions were made, and actually giving it that kind of due kind of respect. I think people don't often do that.
Knowing where to shift, what can you shift? You know, like if you're building a railroad, if you're building a road, if you're building homes, you cannot change the goalposts that much. It doesn't matter. It shouldn't matter what leader comes in, because they should know what the end focus is. Yes, you can make it and tailor it a little bit more, but ultimately you have to be working to the same goal, and that's where the communication side comes into it. It's like, you know, actually, guys, let's refocus. Let's go back to what are we doing? What are the fundamentals?
I mean, one of the biggest issues for me is the start, the middle, and the finish. So what I mean by that is I've worked on infrastructure projects where, you know, you've won the bid, you started work, maybe the government has announced the start of works or the start of the conceptual design piece. And then somebody hands you a construction schedule and says, make a comms plan out of that. Nobody's talked about the values. Nobody's talked about the ultimate benefits to the community, the stakeholders, and all of the partners that you may have to work with over the cycle of the project. And so sitting down with people at the very, very beginning and working out what good looks like. Now, we know there's so many twists and turns, particularly as the construction and the geopolitical landscape changes. No one expects to have a smooth, straight journey. But what you should have at the very, very beginning is a set of visions. So regardless of who comes into the project, they sign up to those visions. They understand what the sort of culture of the project is. And more importantly, if you go out to a party or you go and network with anybody and you make statements at the very beginning of that relationship, the person that talks to you is going to remember all of that. So if you change halfway through, or you even change at the beginning, they'll remember. Every relationship is built on trust. Every relationship is built on memory, particularly with the open comms that we have now. Anybody can be investigated. Anybody can look back at your past and say, but back in 5 years ago, you said this, what's changed? So it's about consistency. It's about messaging. It's about agreeing what your vision is and then maybe finessing it along the way if things change, but keeping to your core values.
And I think often we forget, right, is actually more and more the hurdles that come up, what you put out there is not just words, but it also can become evidence. It can become evidence into inquiries, and so we're not talking small fry things. We're not talking about little pieces of information that may sound nice or feel nice, but actually that might be used in the bottom line, which is terrifying.
So you tell me it's not just about social media, which is mad, right?
Doing it for the clout, doing it for the clout.
But I guess what you said is actually it has legal ramifications as well as business and board ramifications, right? And people can end up in jail for certain things. And I think that is actually it, isn't it? That people aren't taking the whole kind of strategic communications part seriously as much as they should be. And for the reasons you've just said, that's a really good point. Why do you think that is?
Oh, why do we think that is? I think that there is a inherent lack of care about comms. We can all do communications. Yeah, we can. But we can't always all do it to the same parameter, doing that, that horizon scoping, thinking about the bigger picture and the long terms and, getting ourselves ready for when a crisis hits. Not all of us can do that. So many, you see lots of people who come out with idiotic statements and you're like, I wouldn't want to be there. And it's just like, I don't know why you're doing that, because you haven't thought it through. And that's where the value of having a critical friend is, to say, have you thought about that? Because actually that might come and bite you in the bum.
So I'd like to give a recent example. For example, one of our sins, missing the bigger picture, to what Aceil said. Does it cost time, money and reputation? Well, it certainly did for a unnamed utility company just recently, or late last year. If you remember, there was a problem with treatment work, so that left tens of thousands of customers without running water. And the images we saw on the news were just shocking, and I sat there thinking, goodness me, I'm so glad that's not me. The comms failed dramatically, and the company was accused of contradictory and ineffective communications. There was unclear messaging, which left customers and stakeholders and probably regulators confused and frustrated. The message focused around their operational issues and the technical, rather than the human experience. And then the media labelled the leadership tone deaf. And although this type of event is relatively rare, this case shows you how the corporate comms channels broke down under crisis conditions. So where was the crisis plan? Where was the crisis communication plan, which should have fallen out of the strategy? Because we never, ever know what's round the corner. And if you stick to your values and you see the operation or the business you have through the customer's lens, that is what's going to help your reputation and help you recover in the long term.
That's so true. And it's really interesting because I was having a conversation recently, and we were having a conversation about how, business leaders, and I was saying, I think that actually a lot of people are inherently selfish. So for them to actually put themselves in someone else's shoes is actually quite hard. And part of our role as kind of marketing and communications people is actually to put ourselves in other people's shoes. And I think there's a lot of people that can't do that. They can't do that, and they find that quite a difficult thing. And with that, I've got a feeling that is why it's increasingly getting difficult for people, because they're just focused on what they need from something. They're not focused on what the other person needs or what the other stakeholders or the customers. And I think that's a massive issue for people. How can they be less selfish?
I mean, it's where you get your advice. It's who you're getting your advice from, and who are they getting their advice from, and who are they bouncing it off of? Because we all experience things in such different light, and sometimes you have got to check yourself, and that's where having a critical friend or somebody who can bounce off somebody else to get that different perspective, so you can see beyond your own experience, because we are fundamentally flawed.
But there is that thing of getting the advice, but also listening and acting on it, right?
Yeah.
They're a separate beast, aren't they?
Yeah, and offering solutions, because I think that more often than not, people love to, chime in and give her a different perspective, and which is great. But it's also finding the solutions that can support all of us.
But I think the preventative piece in terms of building the strategy so that it mirrors the business strategy and then pulling that down into an operational tactical plan. If you get that right, you give yourself a sporting chance to succeed and be ready for most things. And my favourite saying, whenever being given advice by non-comms people, is "so what?" So I do walk in their shoes, Ayo, and I will ask that question from the customer's position and standpoint. So what? Or the other favourite I've got is, well, you would say that, wouldn't you? And it's not me being difficult. It's probably what is going through your audience's mind. And then that's when the trust starts to erode.
And I think that is that putting yourself in the audience's shoes, right? And I think that is actually fundamentally what a lot of people find difficult. Yeah, and I think that's a huge part of what we do as communicators. It has to be. Okay, so we know that comms and kind of taking the strategic approach can be a bit difficult. So what kind of made you think that this collective, the BE Comms Collective, was something worth doing, Aceil?
Oh, another good question. I mean, do you know what? I was saying this earlier to somebody I'm working with. Do you know, it is so hard to find people that can do the job, do it well, and have sound, solid advice and experience. So when you find people like that, you've got to find ways to work together. And I think that for me, it was like, we've got to make it work, because we all bring such different skills and different perspectives, and but I know fundamentally we'll also get the work done, which is so important at the end of the day for a client's perspective, because we don't need to dither and dally. You need to get it done.
Awesome.
So how does it work? I mean, I think it's coming to us. And knowing that we are bigger than the sum of our parts. You're not going to be working with just one of us, we're going to be working with a collective of us. And we will also bring the right people for the job. So one of the people on our team is Stacey. Stacey is an excellent writer. She is a journalist through and through. She's done it years and years and years. So, you're going to get something written by her with the eyes of a journalist. So we can get ahead of any of those questions because we've got a journalist on the case. We'll bring in Lisa, who has, national experience doing those big strategic projects, so you can lean on that experience and then lean on other people as well to help execute it. We'll put the right people in front of different people, because I mean, again, it makes such a difference, doesn't it? If you're in front of the right person and you're having a conversation, be it a politician, be it Joe on the doorstep, or with another supplier, that makes such a difference to the communication, because people need to ultimately, unfortunately, that's having somebody that mirrors you or somebody that you can be akin to just makes it so much more valuable in terms of that communication.
So we built a tool where people can kind of take a series of questions and kind of understand which issue or which strategic comms issue might be most pertinent to them as a business. And then we can set up a free call with you and we can talk you through some of the ideas and concepts that are coming up for you. So, I mean, how do you find the tool, Aceil, and what you've seen from some of the results for people?
Yeah, I think the gamification of all of these things is really, really valuable, and it's really easy to have some uncomfortable conversations, let's be honest, and be able to find common ground, to find a language that we can all understand and bound by, but then also identify the solutions within it. So I think it's a really good tool for people to understand what's going wrong in a very simple way, and then seek to remedy it.
If anyone wants to use the tool, you head to Matt-PR, which is Aceil's lovely website, and you can use it there. And I'll also put a link in the show notes.
The diagnostic tool, the reason I got really excited about it when it was first designed, Ayo, was we learn through storytelling and case studies. That really hits the mark with people. When they're confused, and they know they're not doing great, but they don't know what the problem is. We're the experts. We walk in and we say, you should try A, B, and C. I can make this happen for you. However, it's that first piece. We are bombarded with bland, vanilla how-to videos on LinkedIn, on other social professional platforms. But when somebody actually gives you a tool that says, try this, let's see what the problem is, let's diagnose the issue, it's so much more than education. It's about clarity and, helping them find their way. That sort of engagement really does help people work out for themselves what may be the issue. And then they know the questions to ask. They know it's don't say pages you, and that's what really excited me.
Actually seeing those questions in front of you makes you think. It's the process of going through it. And I think because I always think as a communications professional, a lot of what we do is ask questions. A lot of it is about asking questions and getting people to think of things from a different way, because again, that helps people get unstuck themselves and just, I guess, change their thought processes, which is a lot of what we do. So I think kind of tools that kind of enable you to act on your own, so you're still autonomous, but actually you're using frameworks and questions that we would use as senior comms professionals. And I think that's the huge benefit of actually having a tool. But also it's visual, it's fun, it doesn't feel old-fashioned and dry, and I think that's a really good point. If anyone wants to use the tool, you head to Matt-PR, which is Aceil's lovely website, and you can use it there, and I'll also put a link in the show notes.
I mean, to follow on from that, in terms of that, the execution then of how do you change things is having people that are senior, are on board and on side, because we know that there's a huge disgruntlement of the big agencies, right? And that's because they become so spreadsheet driven as opposed to delivering thoughtful, mindful comms, which is what we want to do, because yes, we want to be paid, but also we want to do a good job and get things done, because, we see ourselves as the consumers. I think that's a fundamental difference, is we want to be involved in communications because we see ourselves as the end user of all things. And if you start from that position, then you can only deliver good comms, I think.
And also, just to add, we are in a position, March 2026, where we know so many in-house comms professionals, marketing professionals have been let go. So what does that leave you with? That leaves you with a skeleton crew really working very, very hard with a huge workload to do the best they can, which means they become reactive. When an organisation starts becoming reactive, that is when mistakes are made. That is when you're not ready for something that you didn't plan for. And building confidence and keeping trust with your stakeholders and customers is the most important thing in the long term.
Lisa, you couldn't say it better, but I couldn't say it better myself.
And that is really important, actually, because if you don't have that experience, I think experience is massive. Because it's so funny, because in January it was 25 years of me working in construction, and you kind of look back and you go, how much stuff have I been through? And you start to look at it and you realise that actually that is what people are paying for, more of that than anything else. Because it's like, actually, yeah, I've had crazy things happen. You're like someone leaving their laptop on a bloody train open, or whatever, And then someone live tweeted it.
Really?
So I have once had someone live tweeting what they were reading from someone's laptop.
Really?
Oh my
anyway.
God.
I want to know more. Exclusive on the pod.
I ain't doing that here. But anyway. Yeah, that was quite something. But I think, you're right, having those right processes in place and being able to talk to people. And actually, if you've got projects that are slightly going wrong or not going the way that you want, then actually the tool can help you kind of understand more about what you might need. And I think that's really important, is that these are complex problems. They're probably not just one thing going on. And yeah, it's just a kind of starter for 10 in terms of how to get going. And yeah, and also how to get started and talking to us lots. So that's also good as well. So anyway, thank you both for coming onto the show.
Thank you very much for having us.
We warmed up in the end. I will see you all soon. Thank you. Bye. Thanks so much for listening to the Built Environment Marketing Show. If you've liked what you've heard, please do share it with others on social media, as it helps me to spread the word. Thanks so much.